Attorney cleared his throat, and the room went so quiet I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. My son wasn't there. He knew the reading was at 2 o'clock. I had called him myself 3 days before. I had left a voicemail. I had texted. His sister had texted. And still at 2:15, when Mr. Hargrove opened the leather folder and adjusted his glasses, the chair to my left was empty. I kept looking at it. I don't know why. As if staring long enough might make my son appear. He didn't. I need to go back a little because none of this makes sense without understanding who my husband was. 41 years I was married to that man. 41 years, and I can say with complete honesty that I never once saw him cut a corner. Not once. His name was Walter. Walter Dempsey. He grew up in Akron, Ohio, the youngest of 5 kids, in a house where the heat sometimes got cut off in January, and his mother stretched a pot of soup 3 nights running. He used to joke that he learned everything he needed to know about business from watching her manage a household on almost nothing. She never panicked, he'd say. She always had a plan B. He became the same way. Calm. Deliberate. He started his first company at 32, an industrial supply distribution business, the kind that nobody thinks about until something breaks, and he built it over 30 years into something that, by the time he passed, was valued at just over $900 million. He was not flashy about it. We lived well, but Walter never forgot where he came from. He knew every employee by name. He showed up to the warehouse floor unannounced, not to catch anyone doing something wrong, but because he genuinely wanted to know how people were doing. His funeral had over 400 people. I didn't know half of them. They kept coming up to me saying he changed their life, and I believed every single one. Our son Grayson grew up watching none of that stick. I don't say that to be cruel. I used to defend him. For years, I defended him. I told myself he was young, he'd grow up, he'd figure it out. Walter saw it differently and earlier. He didn't say much about it, not to me, but I found out later that he'd been watching our son for a long time. Quietly. The way Walter watched everything. Grayson was 37 when Walter passed, not a young man. He had a good education, we paid for every year of it, a finance job he'd gotten largely because of Walter's name, and a wife named Nadine who I had never trusted from the day I met her. That's not a mother-in-law being territorial. That's a 63-year-old woman who has seen enough of the world to know when someone is looking at her family like it's a resource to be mined. Nadine had the kind of beauty that she used the way some people use a credit card: maximum spend, minimum payback. She wore it confidently and expected things in return. Within 2 years of marrying Grayson, she had convinced him to buy a house in Scottsdale they couldn't afford on his salary alone, to lease 2 cars that made no sense for 2 people, and to quietly start expecting that Walter's money would eventually solve whatever gap existed between what they earned and what they spent. I watched it. I said nothing, or not enough. That is my own failure, and I carry it. What I didn't know, not until after Walter died, was exactly how far that expectation had gone. Grayson had apparently told Nadine, and told her as fact, not speculation, that he would inherit the majority of the estate. He had done math on it. He had made plans on it. Nadine had apparently already started researching real estate in Paradise Valley. Walter knew none of this with specifics, but he knew the character of it. He had known for years. My husband's health began declining 2 winters ago. Pancreatic cancer, the word that sits in your chest like a stone the moment you hear it. We had 8 months from diagnosis, and I will not say much about those 8 months, except that Walter lived them with the same steadiness he lived everything else. He was not angry. He was not in denial. He organized, he prepared, he spent time with the people who mattered to him, and when he was too tired to do more, he rested without apology. During those months, Grayson visited 4 times. 4 times in 8 months. Scottsdale to Phoenix. About 20 minutes by car if there's traffic. 20 minutes, he was always busy. There was always a reason. Nadine's schedule, his own work, a trip they'd already planned. His sister Petra drove in from Flagstaff every single weekend. She'd arrive Friday evening and leave Sunday night. She sat with her father and watched old movies and listened to his stories and held his hand when the medication made him too tired to talk. She never once complained. She never once asked about the will or the estate or what anything meant for her future. She just showed up. Walter noticed everything. 3 weeks before he died, he asked to meet with his attorney alone. I didn't know about that meeting until after the funeral. Mr. Hyteen, Hargrove told me Walter had made some revisions, quiet ones, the kind that don't change the overall document but change everything about it, and that I should bring both children to the reading. I called Grayson the day after we buried his father. The reading is Thursday at 2, I said. Mr. Martin, Hargrove's office. You have the address. Thursday, he repeated. He sounded distracted. What time again? 2 o'clock. I'll try to be there, Mom. Nadine's got a thing that afternoon. I might need to. Grayson, I said. It's your father's will. I know. I'll be there. He wasn't. Petra sat beside me. She had driven down the night before and stayed in her old room. She wore a navy dress and her hair was pulled back, and she looked so much like Walter at certain angles that it made my throat close. She held my hand before Mr. Hargrove began. At 2:20, my son called my cell phone. I let it go to voicemail. Mr. Hargrove looked at me. I nodded and he began. I won't quote the legal language because I couldn't follow most of it in the moment. What I understood was this. Walter had divided the estate into 3 parts. The first was what came to me, the house, certain accounts, enough to live on comfortably for the rest of my life. Walter had been precise about that. I never had to worry. The second was a charitable trust, 10% of the liquid estate directed to a scholarship fund Walter had set up for children of the company's employees and veterans from Akron, where he grew up, where he never forgot that someone once helped his family when the heat went out. The third part was where Mr. Hargrove paused. He removed his glasses, cleaned them briefly, replaced them. A small nervous habit I had learned to notice. Walter included what he called a conditional bequest clause, he said. The clause designates the remaining assets, approximately $640 million, for distribution. However, this distribution is contingent on a performance period of 18 months following the date of death. He looked up. During this period, each beneficiary is evaluated against criteria Walter defined in a sealed attachment. At the conclusion of the period, the trustee, myself, in consultation with an independent evaluator, determines whether the criteria have been met. The room was very quiet. The criteria include demonstrated financial responsibility, sustained involvement in estate-related family obligations, and evidence of character consistent with Walter's stated values. In his words, the understanding that wealth is a responsibility, not a reward. Petra's hand tightened around mine. I didn't move. I had not known the specifics of this. But I was not, I realized, sitting there, entirely surprised. This was exactly how Walter thought. He never gave anything away without expecting it to be understood first. Mr. Rowley, Hargrove continued, if either beneficiary does not meet the criteria, their designated share is redirected to the charitable trust. He looked at me over his glasses. There is a footnote, Mrs. Dempsey. It applies specifically to Grayson. He cleared his throat. Walter wrote, my son is not a bad person, but he has not yet learned the difference between what is owed to him and what must be earned. I hope 18 months gives him the opportunity to learn it. If it does not, I hope the loss teaches him what I could not. I cried then, quietly. I pressed my fingers to my mouth and I cried because that was so completely Walter, even from wherever he was, still trying to give our son a chance, still hoping. Grayson called me that evening. 3 times. I answered on the 3rd. I heard what happened, he said. Petra called me. You weren't there. Nadine had a... I don't want to hear about Nadine's schedule, Grayson. You weren't there. Your father's will was read today and you weren't there. Silence. What's this clause thing? What does it mean for my money? And there it was. Not, I'm sorry I wasn't there. Not, how are you holding up, Mom? Just, what does it mean for my money? It means exactly what Mr. Hargrove explained, I said. There are 18 months. There are criteria. You'll receive documentation. That's insane. Dad can't just, this is my inheritance. This is supposed to be mine. Your father earned it, I said. All of it, from nothing. And he had the right to decide where it went. I need to talk to an attorney. That's your choice. I hung up. The next 6 months were the hardest I have lived through since the diagnosis. Grayson hired a lawyer, a young, aggressive one from a firm in Phoenix that specialized in estate litigation. He filed a formal challenge to the conditional clause, arguing it was coercive and violated Arizona inheritance law. His attorney sent letters, official ones with letterhead. One of those letters suggested that Walter may not have been of sound mind during the final revisions. I had to set that letter down and walk away from it for a full day before I could respond to it calmly. My husband, in his final months, had been sharper than most people are in full health. He had organized every document in our house. He had written personal letters to every person he wanted to say something to. He had met with his accountant, his financial advisor, his attorney, and his doctor. He was of sound mind. He was more of sound mind than our son was in that moment. Mr. Hargrove handled the legal challenge with the calm efficiency of a man who had clearly been prepared for it. Walter had anticipated it. The revisions had been witnessed and notarized with meticulous care. The challenge went nowhere. What it did do was make Grayson angrier. When legal routes closed, he turned personal. He stopped calling me for a while, which hurt, I won't pretend it didn't. And then he started calling again, but differently. He said things I will not repeat here. He questioned my loyalty to him. He said Walter had always favored Petra. He said I had let this happen by not fighting it. Nadine, to her credit or perhaps just to her strategy, stayed quieter during this period. She texted me twice asking if there was anything that could be done. I did not respond. Petra drove down every few weeks. She helped me sort through Walter's things. She sat with me in the evenings. She never once brought up the estate. The 18 months passed the way. Grief time always does, both very slowly and faster than you're ready for. At the 12-month mark, something shifted. I don't know exactly what happened between Grayson and Nadine, but I started hearing from my son differently. The anger had drained out of his voice. He called once and just asked how I was. That was all. Just, "How are you, Mom?" I hadn't heard that in almost a year. He came to visit, once, without Nadine. We sat on the back patio with coffee, and he didn't bring up the will once. He looked older, thinner. He said things at work had been difficult. He said he'd been thinking a lot about his dad. "I remember he used to make me come to the warehouse," Grayson said. "On Saturday mornings. I hated it. I thought it was the most boring place on earth." "You used to hide in the break room and eat the vending machine chips," I said. He almost smiled. "I just wanted to sleep in. I never understood why he made me come." "He wanted you to see what it looked like," I said. "The actual thing, not the result, the actual thing." He was quiet for a while. "I didn't," he said. "I never really saw it." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. At the conclusion of the 18 months, Mr. Hargrove arranged a meeting. Both children were invited to meeting. Both children were invited. Both came. Grayson sat in the same chair that had been empty 18 months before. He was there early. Mr. Hargrove went through the evaluations. Petra had, by every measure, met the criteria. She had been consistently involved. She had demonstrated financial responsibility. She had apparently used some of an earlier family gift years ago to start a small tutoring nonprofit she ran alongside her teaching job, which Walter had known about and noted. She had shown, in Mr. Brohl, Hargrove's careful phrasing, a clear alignment with the values Walter described. She would receive her full share. Then Mr. Hargrove turned to Grayson's evaluation. He paused again. The same small pause as before. I had started to think of it as his way of holding something heavy before setting it down. "Grayson's evaluation is mixed," he said. There were significant early indicators of non-compliance, the legal challenge, the period of withdrawn family engagement. However, He glanced at his notes. In the final 6 months of the evaluation period, there were notable changes. Renewed contact with family, evidence of serious reflection, voluntary enrollment in a financial literacy program, which Walter had actually specified as one possible path toward meeting the character criteria. I looked at Grayson. He was looking at the table. Walter wrote one final note, Mr. Creston, Hargrove said, to be read in the event that his son showed meaningful, if incomplete, progress. He opened a sealed envelope that had been sitting in the folder all along. He read it aloud. Walter's voice in Mr. Hargrove's careful, measured delivery. I heard it as if my husband were in the room. If you're hearing this, Grayson, it means you tried. That matters more to me than you know. I did not design this to punish you. I designed it because I believed you were capable of more than you were showing me, and I ran out of time to show you that directly. The money I built was never the point. The discipline it took to build it, that was the point. I hope you understand that now, even partially. I hope you will keep going. Your father, who loves you. Grayson pressed his hand flat on the table. He didn't cry in front of us. He held it together, barely. Mr. Hargrove closed the folder. Walter designated that in the event of mixed findings, the trustee has discretion to release a partial distribution, with the remainder held in trust pending a secondary 12-month period. He looked at Grayson. You will receive a distribution, a portion. The remainder will be reevaluated in 1 year. It wasn't the full amount. It wasn't what Grayson had expected to receive 18 months ago when he was still doing the math in his head and Nadine was looking at houses in Paradise Valley. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Just okay. And somehow, that word from my son in that office was the first thing he had said in 2 years that sounded like his father. Nadine and Grayson separated 4 months later. I did not ask him about it. Not directly. He brought it up himself on one of his visits. He said it had been coming for a long time. He said some things about her that I won't repeat because they were private and they were painful, and he was only beginning to understand them himself. He got an apartment in Tempe, smaller than anything he'd lived in since college. He seemed strangely lighter. He started coming by more. Some Sundays he'd come for dinner and we'd sit where Walter and I used to sit, and I'd cook something Walter liked. Pot roast, simple things, and we'd talk, real talking. Not the careful, managed conversation of the past several years, but something closer to what it used to be when he was young and hadn't yet learned to be strategic about everything. He asked me once over dinner if I was angry at his father for the way he'd done it. I thought about that for a while. No, I said. Your father tried for years to reach you the regular way. He just ran out of time. He did the only thing he had left. I wish I had, he started and stopped. I know, I said. I reached across the table and put my hand over his, the way I used to when he was small and frightened of things I couldn't fix. He looked down at my hand. He didn't pull away. Petra used part of her distribution to expand her nonprofit. She hired 2 part-time staff members and opened a second location in Flagstaff. She named it, quietly, without fanfare, the Walter Dempsey Learning Center. She called to tell me about it before she made it official. I had to sit down when she said the name. Is that okay? She asked. I wanted it to mean something. It means everything, I said. He would have been embarrassed by it. He would have loved it. She laughed. I miss Walter every single day. I miss him in the morning when I make 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. I miss him when something happens that I want to tell him about. I miss the particular way he had of being quiet in a room. Not absence, but presence, deliberate and steady. There is a kind of person who takes up space in the world without demanding it, who holds things together simply by being themselves, and when that person is gone, the shape they leave behind is permanent. He knew who our son was, and he loved him anyway. He spent his last weeks making sure that love had somewhere to go, even after he was gone. I used to think what Walter did was harsh. A conditional will, 18 months of evaluation, legal parameters around a father's love for his child. It sounded cold when I said it out loud, but I've had 2 years now to sit with it, and I think I understand. He wasn't withholding love. He was refusing to let money replace it. There's a difference. Our son took a long time to see it. He's still learning it, I think. One Sunday dinner at a time. And maybe that's the only way any of us ever really learn anything. Slowly, imperfectly, with someone patient enough to wait. Walter was patient. He taught our son the only way he had left. I think, in the end, Grayson is grateful. He hasn't said it exactly that way. But some evenings when he's here, and the light goes low and it's quiet the way our house used to be quiet when Walter was still in it, I see my son look around the room with something in his face I haven't seen in a very long time. Something that looks more and more like understanding. I've thought about Walter's decision 1,000 times since that afternoon in Mr. Hargrove's office. Whether it was fair, whether it was too hard, whether a father had the right to attach conditions to love or to money, which is not the same thing, though Grayson spent years confusing the two. Here's what I've come to understand. Actions don't disappear. They don't evaporate the moment passes. They settle. They accumulate. Every choice Grayson made, every weekend he didn't come, every call he didn't answer, every visit he cut short because Nadine had something else planned, those things stacked up quietly, the way debt does when you're not paying attention. He didn't see the bill coming because he never believed there would be one. That's the particular blindness of entitlement. It doesn't feel like arrogance from the inside. It just feels like expectation. And Nadine, I don't carry bitterness toward her anymore. She was exactly who she always was. She never pretended otherwise. Not really. What Grayson chose not to see about her was his own doing. We teach people how to treat us by what we accept, and for years my son accepted a version of life built on appearances and assumption. When the foundation turned out to be borrowed, the whole thing came down fast. That's not punishment. That's just the natural weight of things landing where they were always going to land. What moves me when I think about it now is the intelligence of what Walter did. Not legal intelligence, though it was that too, but human intelligence. He understood that handing Grayson $600 million in that moment would have finished him. It would have confirmed every wrong thing he believed about himself and the world. That money was owed to him. That effort was optional. That love was a transaction you could defer and still collect on later. Walter saw all of that, and he refused to be the one who made it permanent. That took a kind of courage I don't think I could have managed. I was still hoping Grayson would just figure it out on his own. Walter knew better. He knew that some lessons only arrive through consequence, and he made sure the consequence was proportional to the lesson. Not cruel. Proportional. Petra never needed any of it, and that's worth saying plainly. She showed up for her father, for me, for our family. Because that's who she is. She didn't calculate. She didn't weigh what she might receive against what it cost her to give. She just came. And the life she's building now, the learning center she named after her father without fanfare or drama, that's not luck. That's the return on years of quietly doing the right thing when no one was keeping score. I think about what I want people to take from this, and it isn't complicated. The character you build in private, in the small decisions, the inconvenient ones, the ones where no one is watching, that is the only thing that is ever truly yours. Money can be lost, titles fade, marriages end, but who you are when something costs you something, when it's hard, when you'd rather be somewhere else, that follows you everywhere. It becomes you. Grayson is still becoming. I watch it happening, Sunday by Sunday, quietly, the way his father built everything worth having, slowly, without shortcuts. I think Walter would be proud of that, not of what our son lost. He would have hated that part, but of who is emerging on the other side of it. That's all any parent ever really wanted. Not gratitude, not legacy, just to know that what you gave them, not the money, the actual things, the values and the effort and the years, meant something in the end. It's meaning something now. I can see it. That's enough.